Welcome back. W in the middle of staying up all night with two picks in our eyes, watching the Washington Capitals. Many Wizards fans experiencing the same thing, and, of course, the doldrums of the Orioles and the NFL draft ahead. This guy, though, is all NBA all the time. The new book is The Soul of Basketball, the epic showdown between LeBron, Kobe, Doc, and Dirk that saved the NBA. And, of course, of those guys, Dirk is my favorite basketball player, and I'll get to that momentarily. But Ian Thomsen, longtime Sports Illustrated scribe, now with a book on the NBA. You can follow him out on Twitter as well, at Ian Thomsen. That's Thomsen, out of the fighting city of Boston, Massachusetts, where they murdered the Orioles over the weekend. Ian, what's going on? Welcome in. Happy basketball season. And I guess for folks that are a little bit more casual with the NBA as I am, it is sort of ubiquitous this time of the year. Every night there are games, and this is the World's League as much as any other league in America, right?
Yeah. No, it's a great time of the year. This next month is a great time of the year for a basketball fan. There are virtually games every night, and they're great games. A lot of them are great games, and more competitive, I think, the first round has been than ever before. It is the world game, and a lot of it has to do with your guy, Dirk Nowitzki. Doc Rivers, the former coach of the Celtics, told me, and I think he got this right, that Dirk Nowitzki changed the dream for players around the world. Players around the world just used to hope to get to the NBA, and because of Dirk coming to the NBA and building himself up and learning to beat the American players at their own game, winning the championship in 2011, showed that they can dream higher. They can dream of becoming the best player, the leader of a championship team in the NBA. And I think as much as we talk about Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, LeBron James as important players in the history of basketball, if you look at it from a global perspective, Dirk Nowitzki is in that group. He's one of the most important players in the history of the game, because of what he has shown to the rest of the world.
Well, and also, kind of an American game, and a Peach Bucket, and Naismith, and all that stuff, and all these American heroes came along. I'll give you my Dirk story in a moment, but I got off a plane in Beijing, China, Hong Kong, Tokyo. But I went in 2006, I went with Cal Ripken. They were advancing the Beijing Olympics for baseball, and the first thing you saw when you got off the plane, and incidentally, your Sports Illustrated folks back in the day were all over there, it was Yao Ming, and Tiger Woods, sure. Tennis, sure. Maybe Lance Armstrong at that point, sure. But the NBA was very, very clear that baseball, the NFL, and certainly hockey don't travel the way basketball travels. And now that I've spent time down in South America, Manu Ginobili, and I was down in Argentina. And look, I travel the world where soccer is everything. But boy, the NBA's kind of catching it. And you wouldn't know that in Baltimore. You wouldn't even know that in LA or Chicago or Boston or New York. You'd have to get out and see it. But basketball has captivated the people outside of this country in much more of a way than maybe people here even realize, right?
Oh, yeah. I would say the easiest way to say it, Nestor, there are more NBA fans outside America than there are in America. It's just that simple. And when you watch an NBA game, you're really watching a melting pot, aren't you? You're seeing players from all around the world, players of all colors, all shapes and sizes, all religions, all cultures, different points of view. Some guys are selfish, some guys are team first, but they all have to get together and work it out as a team, playing at full speed, going up and down the court. It's like a theater that symbolizes the American dream, kind of, and that's what you see when you see all these guys from around the world dreaming of getting to America, dreaming of playing in the NBA. That's what Dirk Nowitzki did, and that's why his message is so powerful. Look, you can have this dream, and it can come true. It won't come true for everybody, but you can dream it, and you can go for it and see what's going to happen.
Ian Thomsen covers the National Basketball Association. The new book is out. You can check it out, The Soul of Basketball. You can also follow him, and thousands do, on Twitter at Ian Thomsen. That's Thomsen. Also, IanThomsen.com is another way to find him, as well as the book. All right, so you ready for the best story of the day? My wife was diagnosed with leukemia 4 years ago last month, and during, early on, she needed someone to save her life with with a bone marrow transplant. And the man who stepped up to save her life, we knew he was from Europe. We received a letter about a month after he saved her life back in 2014, and we found out he was from Germany. We sort of knew that. And the German law is if you can live 2 years, you get to meet your donor. Well, the most unique thing happened at Johns Hopkins. We received this letter written from the man who saved my wife's life the first time. He saved her life a second time later, a year and a half later. But we got a letter, and in the letter, there are parts of it that were redacted to keep his identity anonymous. But the first sentence in the thing was, "I'm a sports fan," which we found to be crazy because it's all I've done for a living. But he said, so of course, me being German, I'm a fan of blank and the team blank. And, me being a sports guy, I'm like, kid's a Dirk Nowitzki fan that saved my wife's life. And we knew he was 20 years old. Well, we found him a year and a half later. He saved my wife's life twice with bone marrow. And I got on the trail to finding Dirk Nowitzki, who I figure was probably a pretty good guy. Mark Cuban seems like a pretty good guy. I've been doing this for 33 years, and lo and behold, 2.5 years later, my wife's donor and savior met Dirk Nowitzki underneath of Madison Square Garden in New York about a year and a half ago. And when you talk about bringing the world together through basketball, through Europe and South America and Asia and all that's come together, we certainly have felt that in our place as well. And I can only imagine the kind of hero Dirk Nowitzki is in Germany, but he's certainly a hero to the kid that saved my wife's life. And, that's the sort of thing that makes America, the NBA travels well around the world to America. Let's say perhaps better than Donald Trump does these days, right? As far as an image issue, right?
Yeah. Nestor, I really appreciate you sharing that story, even if we weren't on the radio. This is tremendous to hear, and I'm so glad your wife has recovered. And what a thing. I mean, you never know where the savior is going to come from, do you? This is an amazing story.
Well, Dirk Nowitzki, I guess, being a great guy and stepped up, and he's done all sorts of things. But, for the next round of this, the league, much to Donald Trump's chagrin, is going to be less American, right? Like, moving forward over the next 50 years, the stars of the league are going to be the Greek kid, or the kid from China, or Asia, or Malaysia, or Germany, or Greece, or wherever it's going to be. It's going to be the least American league by the time it's all over with. And I know people got down on the Canadians 30 years ago taking over the NHL, and the Europeans and the Russians, but the NBA more than anything is recruiting all over the world at this point.
Absolutely true, and it's just math. There's all these kids are growing up dreaming of making it in the NBA, and yes, it's already become an international league. It's something like more than 25% of the players are from around the world, and it's going to be more and more. And that's why people are forecasting the NBA will become the most popular league or most powerful league in America. When you look at the problems for baseball is seen as slow, and football has problems of identity. They don't know who they are anymore. They don't know whether they should be violent or not. And there's all sorts of concerns about the health of the players. So you put that all together, and then the fact that
basketball doesn't have concussion either, right? Like that's another thing.
Occasionally, but it's not meant to set up that. Football is inclined to create concussions, and as the technology keeps changing and the world becomes more wired together, and people on the other side of the world can watch the exact same things we're watching at the same time, it's going to become easier and easier to do that. And the NBA is made for that. I mean, a lot of people around the world are watching NBA games on their phone because it translates that way. You can watch a game on your phone. And the NBA is very open-minded as far as social media and marketing and ways for people to share their information. If you're an NBA fan around the world, the NBA says, please take all of our video content and go ahead and do anything you want with it. The NFL doesn't allow that. So everything about the NBA is about growing the game around the world, and and you're exactly right about what the future of the league is. It's to become a global league.
Ian, you mentioned the soul of basketball, right? And something saving, and I see that on your cover. It saved the NBA. I remember when Magic and Larry were going to save the NBA, and then Michael was going to save the NBA, and after Michael, who was going to save the NBA, right? This I guess the thesis of the book comes from when the NBA was struggling, right? I mean, there was a point 15, 20 years ago, sort of after Michael, and Michael came back and dribbled around for the Wizards for 5 minutes, or the Bullets, or whatever they were called at that point. And it was going to be LeBron, and LeBron has been every bit as good as advertised, right? Like, for a kid coming out of Akron that was going to save the league, 15, 20 years later, they haven't played a finals without him lately, and they still might not in a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, no. When you look at LeBron now, you wonder, and you look at the popularity of the NBA now and where it's headed and people talking about its future, you're right. It's hard to imagine that the NBA was in trouble, but it was. Back in 2010-11, when LeBron went on TV to do the decision and announced he was leaving Cleveland to move to Miami, the NBA was in a lot of trouble. He was the most talented player in the league, 25 years old. He was the future of the league. Since he'd been 17 years old, he'd been forecast to replace Michael Jordan at the top of the NBA. And he was hated. He was a national villain. People were watching the best player in the NBA hoping he would lose. And that was the exact opposite of the Jordan formula. People watched the NBA hoping Jordan would win in his day in the 90s. And now it turned the other way around. That's a terrible dynamic for a league, especially a league as young as the NBA is. It's by far the youngest major league in America. And on top of all that, Nestor, the league was losing a lot of money. They were claiming $1 billion worth of losses over a 3-year period. 22 teams were claiming to lose money every year. And they were headed into a lockout in the middle of the global recession that was going on back then. So you had teams losing money. They were going to shut down the league during a global hard times, and the best player was hated. It was a really bad formula, and it all changed because LeBron did go to Miami. He learned how to become a champion, and he became the guy that we see today, the guy that's created this rivalry with the Warriors and Steph Curry, and it's all turned around. But back then there was no predicting any of this.
What do you love about the NBA? How many years you been following it, by the way? I mean, I'm assuming, anybody that's done this, from a business perspective, did this back in the 70s and 80s as a kid just watching sports and falling in love with something or somebody. I guess your Boston background would lead you to Larry Bird, right?
Yeah, I'm not from Boston originally, as you can tell from my accent. But my first job was with the Boston Globe in the 1980s, and I covered all 3 of the Magic, Larry, NBA finals, and I lived in Europe in the 90s with the International Herald Tribune, and I was with the Dream Team and did a lot of European basketball. And then in this century, I've been covering the NBA full time, mainly for Sports Illustrated, later for NBA.com. In my job, you're never a fan. You're always pulling for the story, and so I've gotten to know and been around a lot of these great players, and a lot of that stuff is in this book, and a lot of the relationships that I've developed over the years enabled me to go deep with the people in the book, whether it's Kobe Bryant or Greg Popovich or Pat Riley and Doc Rivers, Paul Pierce, Dirk Nowitzki, Rick Carlisle, Mark Cuban. A lot of people really opened up to me because I was trying to write a book that was inspiring. When I talk about the soul of basketball, I'm trying to get past the money, the agents, free agency, all that kind of stuff.
The FBI investigating all the NCAA and just sort of little things like that, right?
Different league, but that's not why the fans are watching, right? The fans are watching because they want to be inspired. That's why they love Michael Jordan. That's why LeBron going back to Cleveland, winning the championship in Game 7, blocking that shot of Iguodala at the end of the game to seal the championship. That's why they watch. They want to be inspired, and I wanted to get to the story that explains how these people do things that are inspiring.
He is Ian Thomsen. The book is The Soul of Basketball, the epic showdown between LeBron, Kobe, Doc, and Dirk, my favorite, that saved the NBA. You can find him out at Ian Thomsen on Twitter, as well as the book anywhere books are sold, including Amazon and other places. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Howard Bank, a relentless commitment to being the best at everything they do. Branches throughout Baltimore. If you're in the business of business here in Baltimore, you need Howard Bank with you. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Make sure you're downloading the ROFO app. When you're gassing up, you'll earn points. Going to get you some free Western fries, some free fried chicken, some tasty coffee. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. Also brought to you by our friends at Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need the right lender, whether you're buying, selling, refinancing, or just trying to get some education on the biggest investment of your life. You need Freedmont.com. They do it there. Ian, last thing for you. We're into the playoffs now, and obviously around here, being Wizards fans to some degree, and up the road, the 76ers have trusted the process and all that stuff. It still very much feels like it's, to your point, LeBron and whoever team he's playing for in the East, and that's Cleveland this year. And then there's Golden State, who, you want to write off during the end of the regular season, and Houston's coming on, and injuries setting in and whatnot. But we look up, and it still feels like Golden State's still, good luck beating them 4 times in 7 nights is all I can say.
You're right. There's a few teams every year that can win the championship, and this year you put your finger on them. Toronto may be a dark horse to come out of the East and do it, but it's always been this way in the NBA. We were talking just a minute ago about the 1980s, and people look at that as the golden era for the NBA, when it was Magic and Larry, and then Michael was coming up trying to break through, and Isaiah Thomas was the villain of that group. But when you look at it, really, there were only a few teams that had a chance to win it then, and the Lakers went to 8 finals in that decade. They went almost every year. You always knew who was going to be in the mix. Philadelphia was part of that too.
I think that's the part that sucks about the league. I mean, that's the thing I absolutely hate about the NBA. I'm getting ready for the draft around here, Ian. I got 32 teams. Legitimately, 25 of them think they can win the Super Bowl next year. Like, legitimately. Baseball. I mean, no bigger baseball guy than me. I mean, check my last name. Google it. I mean, there's only 8 or 10 teams that can really win the World Series, and there are 15 that are horrific, right? So, and I feel that way about the NBA. I look at the NBA most years, and there are 20 teams that stink, kind of, sort of. And then there's, 5 teams that can win and 8 others that sort of pretend. And the Wizards have felt, quite frankly, along with the Hawks and the Raptors and a bunch of other teams, like, they'll win their 45, 50, whatever games it'll be. But when it comes down to it, they don't really have a chance of winning in April and May. And I think that's the unfortunate part about the league, because it doesn't suck me in from a drama standpoint. It's sort of like, wake me up last week of May and tell me if Golden State or if I can watch LeBron lose, And I think that's something that, to your point, all of my lifetime that's been there, that there's been no parity in the NBA. That's weird.
Yeah, and I hear where you're coming from, and I just think it's a function of the fact that it's so difficult to win the championship, and you just can't. There are things you can't overcome in the NBA. You have to have an organization that is run really well. And everybody from top to bottom, from the owner to the general manager to the scouts to the coaches, the players, they all have to be focused on winning a championship. And it sounds like a cliche, but it has to be the most important thing to them. It has to drive all of their experiences, all of their ambitions. It can't be about individual things. And you can't just all of a sudden say, okay, today I'm going to try to win, even though I didn't yesterday. It has to be from top to bottom. That's the difference. That's why you see the same organizations winning it all the time. And I think that's a big difference between the NFL and the NBA. An NFL team can get hot in the playoffs and win, or they can have the right mix one year, and no one really understands why it happened, but they can win. In the NBA, it has to be a real organizational thing. And there's just no way around that.
By the way, I don't have a whole lot of NBA guys on here, and certainly very few that really know Popovich. I have a handful of people in my world that cover the league at that level. You're one of those guys that knows Popovich a little bit. Very, very inspiring. And by the way, the trip that I took with my wife's donor, we did 5 NBA games in 7 nights. So we did NBA games in Washington. We saw LeBron. We saw both teams play in LA. We saw the Clippers and the Lakers on back-to-back nights. We went to Golden State, and we were in Golden State literally the day after the election. So this is a year and a half ago, and we were at the Steve Kerr press conference where he went nuts the day after the election, literally 10 feet away from Steve that night. Popovich has taken it to a whole different level politically in a league that, quite frankly, has primarily been made up of men of color in this country for all of my lifetime, for sure. Popovich Popovich, when it's all said and done, is going to be on the right side of history through all of this stuff. But boy, as outspoken a human being this side of Kaepernick that we've had anywhere in sports, right?
Yes. It's agree or disagree with him. I think it takes a lot of courage in this climate for someone in sports, whether it's Popovich or Steve Kerr or LeBron, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, a lot of the NBA players who have been speaking out based on their beliefs. And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that Michael Jordan set up the league to be stable financially. In our lifetime, Nestor, we can go back and look at a time when people thought the NBA might not survive. When David Stern became commissioner in '84 and Michael Jordan entered the league in the draft a couple of months later, the NBA was just coming off a period where they had been fighting off bankruptcy. Several teams were in danger of going under, and there was a lot of talk that a league of black players could never be popular. And Michael Jordan blew all that out of the water. He showed that was a fallacy, that people can look beyond color and see that he's a person, not judge him in terms of race. And so he put the league on that platform where they didn't have to worry so much about money anymore. They could experience a sense of freedom. And you're seeing these players today and these coaches today, they're exercising that freedom, that American right to speak your mind and to stand on principle. And it's a great thing. And I think in a way it's separating the NBA from the other leagues, and that's a healthy thing, whether or not you agree with their principles or their points of view.
Well, it's a hell of a juxtaposition for me being out in Owings Mills on Tuesday, and you're not even allowed to say the words Colin Kaepernick, right? Like literally, that the NFL has gone the other way with the white right side of this thing from the ownership standpoint. I don't know what the cost is going to be. Certainly in Baltimore, we got 30,000 empty seats in the upper deck because there is the Trumper side of this whole thing. But on the other side of this, there's right and wrong. And, I don't know that the NFL is doing the right thing at this point. I think there's a lot of lip service. The NBA is certainly going to be the leader on this thing when guys like Popovich and Kerr are stepping up, because that's just not happening in our country in a lot of places right now.
We're in a bridge period, aren't we, where we don't know where we're headed, and there's a fight over the soul of the country and what we're going to be and what we're going to represent. And you almost wish you could just flip the pages and go ahead and see how it's all going to turn out. But I give credit to anybody. I give credit to anybody that really takes a principled stand and speaks out on that behalf.
Hey, man, good luck with your book. I know it's a great time of the year for anybody that loves the NBA. The book is the soul of basketball. Ian Thomsen's our guest, the epic showdown between LeBron, Kobe, Doc, and Dirk that saved the NBA. Lots of great basketball ahead. Really appreciate the visit and your time today, Ian. Good luck with the book. We'll send everybody out to Twitter to see you and everybody out to Amazon to buy the book.
I really appreciate it. Great talking to you, Nestor, and all my best to you and your wife.
We'll check in again sometime before the NBA Finals. Hope so, Ian. Be well.
Take care. Thank you.
You got it. Ian Thomsen, NBA writer for many, many years at the Boston Globe and at Sports Illustrated. You can find him at Ian Thomsen. That's Thomsen, unique spelling, out on Twitter. You can find me in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. Our morning newspaper ships directly to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That's brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's always $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, always judgment-free with the Lunk Alarm there as well. Our morning newspaper also includes the Laurel entries for the weekend, and of course the Tessio being run down at Laurel, getting you ready for the Pimlico and Preakness run coming next month. Preakness is May 19th, the Black-Eyed Susan on the 18th. My wife and I are headed down to Laurel on the 5th for the final day of the meet down there to see the Kentucky Derby and see if Bob Baffert and Justify can get that done. All of our entries also on the front page of WNST.net. Laurel, Pimlico and the Maryland Jockey Club partnering with WNST.net. Al's Seafood is down there in Essex. I've been getting crabs and crab cakes down there since the 1970s. The oldest crab house in Baltimore is there. We lost Al a couple of months ago. He was a bone marrow transplant survivor as well for many, many years. Chad, the crab man, is still there, getting through without Al these days. Give Chad our condolences. Give him some love. Stop down there. Pick up a six-pack, too. They got the liquor store out in front. You can take your crab cakes home and your shrimp home, or Chad will be glad to throw some onions and some beer and some Old Bay in there and rock you out some shrimp to take home like he used to do for my mom. Al's Seafood, Stemmers Run, Eastern, right there in Essex at the heart of the 702, right where it dumps off. Right where Pizza John's is down the street, too. I mentioned one, I mentioned them both. Pizza John's, we were there last weekend, knocking back the pizza and the cheesesteaks. I got to get the ravioli at some point, the cheese and the meat ravioli. I'm working on that. I can't eat everything on the menu at Pizza John's, but I do try. Back River Neck Road, 50 years. They've been doing it down there. That was my mom's favorite pizza as well. Essex. My mom and dad got married in Mount Carmel back in 1945, so I love having sponsors within 1 square mile of Mount Carmel. So cheers to Al's and to Pizza John's and all the rest of our sponsors. Please take care of them. They take care of us. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.